Welcome to this technical deep dive into some of the background lore of the Hegira Contravention series. My name is Drew Wagar, and I'm the author of this series of space opera books. As we explored in the last episode of the deep dive into spacecraft technology, we looked at how some of the smaller ships operate using 1G thrusters in order to provide a sort of pseudo-gravity that's indistinguishable from the real thing. Now, what you're looking at on the screen this time is, of course, a space station. Now, space stations are another place where the inhabitants of the Hegira Universe will congregate from time to time, and they do form the focal point of some of the action in the stories. Now, space stations are not under thrust. They tend to be in orbit around a planet or located in a point of interest where there's some reason for commerce or trade to exist. As such, they're sitting in a zero-G environment, and there's no way to apply thrust to a space station. In fact, having a space station moving about would sort of defeat the point, because the idea is that it's in a locale which is a useful point for people to be able to reach, and that might be because there's an inhabitable planet there, or some other place where there's resources or some kind of operation that needs to be taken into account. So a space station is designed to stay put, but as we've already mentioned, having a space station that is in zero-G isn't very comfortable for anybody aboard, so you need another solution. Now, as I've already mentioned in the previous deep dive, I'm not using any magic technology such as anti-gravity plates or anything like that in the Hegira universe. These stories are grounded in real physics, so we have to stick with a more traditional solution. Now, a spinning space station is one way of providing a sort of pseudo-gravity. The idea being that if you spin your space station at the right speed, on the interior surface, inertia provides you with a feeling that is very, very like gravity, but is subtly different in the way it works. Now, your space station needs to be of a reasonable size in order for this to work. The smaller the space station, the faster it has to spin, and a fast spinning space station causes all sorts of problems. So a space station will have to be a minimum size in order to make this viable. And obviously there's some fairly hefty engineering and construction techniques that would need to be defined. But we are dealing with a society that's about 1,000 years in the future from the present day. So I've allowed myself a certain amount of laissez-faire in terms of what is actually possible to build. But the physics behind a spinning space station works. It's been seen many times in science fiction. It's not an unusual trope to see, so you'll probably not be surprised to see it here. It's entirely practical from a physics perspective. From an engineering perspective, it's going to be pretty complicated to work out, but you've got 1,000 years to work out the details. Suffice to say that a large spinning ring or a series of rings provides you with an awful lot of interior space, and if you set the space station spinning it doesn't need to be particularly fast, particularly on a bigger space station. From the inhabitants' perspective, on the inside edge of the ring, you can have up to, again, 1G gravity, make things very, very comfortable, which allows you to have all the normal interior appointments that you'd expect to have on the planetary surface. So you can have hotels, swimming pools, shops, malls, and everything else that you would expect. The closer you get to the centre of rotation, of course, the lower the perceived gravity is. And that gives you the opportunity to have low gravity regions or high gravity regions depending on the clientele aboard. So perhaps older people might enjoy a slightly lower gravity environment than the outside edge of the ring. Maybe there's even a possibility that rich people will have lower gravity than the poor people who have to live at the edge where the gravity is higher. So maybe even social strata as well. Now, the long-range interplanetary ships are probably, again, very large constructs. So in the Hegira universe, I've postulated that there are small ships doing trading and potentially fighting and plying their way across the stars. But there's an awful lot of sort of space tourism as well. And so you might have vast interplanetary ships catering for ferrying people from one planet to the other in a reasonable period of time. We're probably talking several weeks, possibly a month or so, for these ships to move between the planets. But interplanetary travel is an accepted staple of the Hegira universe, and that sort of travel is done in purposely designed ships which have potentially luxurious accommodation on board. So previously we looked at sort of workaday ships, but large vessels with kind of opulent interior appointments, again, such as swimming pools or big hotels, The sort of stuff you'd find on a modern day cruise ship, but magnified and put into space, would be the sort of things that you'll see flying between planets. Again, these are all based around 1G thruster technology, so the large spacecraft will be designed to cope with 1G acceleration at all times. They will go through that 0G flip over moment that I've already mentioned. But their interior accommodations would be, shall we say, reassuringly expensive, and the well-heeled in Hegaran society would be able to avail themselves of a luxury ship transporting themselves between planets and conducting space tourism along those lines. Ambassadors, dignitaries, and all sorts of other people would probably follow in the similar design ships. Exceptions to this, of course, would be military ships. Now, military ships would be able to fly much faster. They'd be designed for much higher G thrusters, and we'll have a look at some of the capabilities of those ships in an upcoming video. Suffice to say that what you don't want to be doing in any of these ships is any kind of violent manoeuvres. These are not ships where you can undertake evasive manoeuvres, because the ship is so large that it just cannot manoeuvre out of the way of anything. You'd have to have several hours notice, possibly even days notice, to avoid objects in your path. So knowing your flight path and knowing what's ahead of you is very, very important with these large ships. So good maps and good collision avoidance systems and radar would be very, very important to navigating these kind of vessels. They would have defensive capabilities of assault. We're not postulating anything along the lines of phaser beams or laser beams or photon torpedoes or anything along those sort of lines, but it is possible potentially to pirate a ship like this with a high-speed interceptor vessel. So ships do come with defensive capabilities in the terms of potentially escort ships, which are more military inclined, and ships would also probably have ballistic turrets aboard in order to stave off any physical attack by missiles or torpedoes or anything along those sort of lines. But you're not going to see these ships manoeuvring at any kind of high speed at any time. They're designed to ply their way through the stars in a luxurious way as possible. I hope you've enjoyed that second look at some of the spaceship tech in Hegira, and look forward to the next video.